Weirdly, like when you're in the jungle, you don't really need to worry about venomous snakes or scorpions. You have it in the back of your mind that they're there. The things that do and will actually kill you are big lumps of wood that have been waterlogged. It's called deadfall, and the wind blows and the big branches will fall out.
And you need, I assume you have a good first aid kit as well.
You need a big first aid kit, yeah.
Extreme TV adventurer Aldo Kane is a former Royal Marines sniper who saw action in Iraq and the Middle East before setting up his own company, Vertical Planet, to provide safety expertise to the film and television industry. Thank you so much for joining me, Aldo. I just wanted to start by asking, you've done so much. What is it that motivates you?
Hi, thanks for having me on. I think since a young age, I've always been motivated by myself and for myself, really, and it's been something that I suppose got me through quite tough military training when I was 16, I guess, and it's just been something that I've always compounded on top of, and really, I think ultimately the motivation that I have is to be able to continue doing what I do, to travel and to work until I'm old, and that motivates me to stay fit. That motivates me to continually be learning. That motivates me to do the best job that I can whenever I'm doing that.
And I wanted to ask you about structure, because that's something that I know that you've spoken about before as being very important, not just for your physical health, but for mental health as well. Have you always had structure in your life? Even as a 16-year-old, did you try and apply it to your daily life?
It's one that I very much live, like you say, live by now, as routine, discipline, structure. I guess that's the sort of pillars that I build everything else around. I don't think I had it when I was a kid. I really, all I did was go to school, and I was in the Scouts, and and then I joined the Marines at 16. So I had a paper round. Maybe I was disciplined to get up and deliver papers on a cold, wet day. But I think it was, that it was definitely joining the Marines at the age of 16. Everything's laid out for you. It's, every single day there are 6, 7, 8, 9 things that you need to do in that day. You need to be ready for the next one before the last one. And it's that routine and discipline that then allows you to cram so much more into the same 24 hours that everyone else has got. And then certainly with the life that I lead now, I'm bouncing from one country to another to a different job. If I'm not organized, and my sort of kit's not in the right place, and it's not just me that suffers, it's there's the production could suffer as well. So I think routine, discipline, they're like the two major pillars that allow me to do everything else.
And then tell me about your time in the Marines. So you had 10 years there, and obviously started when you were 16, very young, and became a sniper, which is the most difficult sniper training in the world, I've been told. So that's no small feat already. What was it about being a sniper that appealed to you?
It was just something for me that I wanted to do. It was, it was in the back of my head that's kind of the direction that I was going in. You do lots of stuff in the Marines. You're training to fight in every environment on Earth. But I think really, when I look back on it, all those technical skills you could learn, shooting a rifle, camouflage and concealment, navigation, that sort of thing. It all comes into its own for me now when I still apply the soft skills of the commando spirit, courage, determination, unselfishness, cheerfulness in the face of adversity. Those 4 key pillars are is the thing that I always take away from the Marines. It's such an amazing life for me, informative. From 16 till 26, I was brought up by, the Royal Marine Commandos, and everything else that I've done since 26 has been, directly or indirectly affected by that organisation and by my time in that organisation.
I wanted to ask you as well about cheerfulness in the face of adversity, because that was something that surprised me. I didn't know that element to the motto. And I think it's such an important skill, but kind of hard to learn. How did you find yourself mastering it?
It's, I guess another way of coining that phrase would be resilience, or, you know, the ability to gallows humor, to have fun when, you know, situations are pretty tough, is something that isn't taught to you in the Marines, but by default of doing very tough jobs around the world in tough environments, you kind of develop this resilient, unshakable, unbreakable character. And I think, you know, that's you know, when I'm filming these TV expeditions, it's tough, it's hard work, it's rarely glamorous, and you know, you need a lot of you basically need a good sense of humor, because it's that drives you through it. And really, that cheerfulness in the face of adversity can be used in any situation. You know, we're at the minute slowly coming out of lockdown. This has been a particularly tough, you know, quarter of a year almost, and that's, you know, that sense of humor, that cheerfulness in the face of adversity is, you know, it's what gets you through it, it's what gets me through it.
So then your first television job was to safely guide a camera crew within a volcano and then out again, an active volcano, I should say, which made me realise that you really don't shy from a challenge. How do you prepare for something like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's lots of, yeah, that was my first job in television, but I suppose my preparation was that I had been in the Royal Marines for 10 years. I'd become an expert in operating in almost every environment on Earth. And, you know, when you're abseiling into an active volcano, you know, you're kind of, you can do everything that you can to mitigate risk, you know, the subjective hazards, but then ultimately you're still doing a risky job. You're abseiling into a volcano, and you know, Mother Nature doesn't sort of mess around. And so you can do all the planning and preparation, kit wise and mentally wise, and taking the right people in the right team, but then, you know, you get to a point where you just have to get on with the job. And I'd never been inside a volcano before, so it was it was a good eye opener, and it's I've been inside the same volcano 3 times now, and I've done probably another 5 or 6 volcano jobs, and it never ceases to amaze me just how spectacular and violent they are. It blows me away, and you know, every time I go back to one, I'm still blown away by just how beautiful and destructive and dangerous they are.
And did you have to abseil in? So I've got visions of you in the silver suit that's heat reflective and tries to protect you. Did you actually have to abseil in that, or?
Not in the suit. In that specific volcano in Nyiragongo in Democratic Republic of Congo is, you know, it's a big wide crater, so there's no need for that suit there. So it's quite pleasant. I say pleasant. There's noxious gases, and there's molten lava, small shards of glass get whipped up. But you know, temperature wise, it's fairly pleasant operating temperature. It's only when you get close to the open vents that have projectiles coming out that it provides you a little bit of protection, possibly. We didn't put it to the test.
Is that the most hostile environment you've been in your days as a working with camera crews?
I think so. I suppose there's a couple of different hostile environments that you could be in. Volcanoes, you know, like I spend my life in the natural world, sort of outside the confines of comfort, you know, and spent years finding comfort in the uncomfortable, but I would have to say being inside a volcano always has that, you're always on edge, because you know, there's so many things that could go wrong while you're in there, so you have this underlying feeling of terror, really.
And
it's harsh.
What advice do you have for dealing with fear? Are there any techniques that you use?
There's lots of environments that I go to that I'm continually having to question what it is that I'm doing, and I think that keeps it, that fear for me keeps it keeps me being safe, as safe as I can be, and making the right call. But the easiest thing, I think, for dealing with fear, anxiety, and stress is to stop, breathe, and then make a decision based on facts.
So then another incredible feat that you did was your world record breaking crossing of the Atlantic, the most difficult route, where you, am I correct in saying you capsized 3 times in the middle of the ocean?
We did.
What was that like?
We rode across the Atlantic from mainland Europe, Portugal, to mainland South America, to Venezuela. And it's a journey that it takes like 12 hours to fly, that route almost, which I had just did before I did the row on another job. And so effectively you get in a rowing boat. There's 5 of us, Team Essence, and we started rowing from Portugal, and took us 50 days to get to Venezuela. But we were capsized 3 times. One of them, the first one when it happened, was at night, big seas, and it capsized the boat sort of mid-crew change. Probably our fault for taking the eye off the ball, but we're tired, and mistakes happen. And we ended up, basically the boat turned right over. It's pitch black, you can't see anything, you can just hear all the rushing water. So we kind of spent the next 4 or 5 hours sorting stuff out, sorting ourselves out. And we lost some kit overboard, and we were still in the middle of this storm. So really it was kind of survival mode. For the first hour or so was survival mode, then the next 3 or 4 hours was sorting kit out and trying to make a plan. And then the sort of storm passed us by, and we could sort of start rowing again. But yeah, it was pretty epic.
In the darkness, if you've capsized, how do you have a natural sense of direction as to where to swim when you're underneath the boat? Or because I can imagine it's quite disorientating.
It was just massively disorientating. You can't see, it's disorientating. You're attached by a small lanyard from your waist to the side of the boat, so you can't see much. It's cold. You're kind of just groping around trying to grab a piece of the boat. You grab the sort of lanyard, pull yourself in, and you kind of pull yourself around, and then try and come up with a plan as to how to rock it back over. So I'm looking back in it happened very, very quickly, and you're kind of in that mode of just doing things, getting through the next 5 minutes, get through the next 10 minutes, get through the next hour. What do we do? Then you can start to sort of open your sort of metaphorical horizon as to what's possible and where you can go and what you can do. But when you're in the heat of the moment, you're just survival mode. You're just getting stuff done.
Had you all worked together before? Because I can imagine in a situation like that, who takes control, who makes the plan, or is it a collective?
We were all friends. So the 5 of us were all friends. Matt was the captain. There's obviously me, Foxy, Ross, and Bailey. And I suppose when it happened, we all kind of did our own little bit of, someone takes charge, they get the boat over, then everyone does their little bit of what they're in charge of. Someone starts sorting kit out, someone starts keeping direction on nav and makes sure we're not getting smashed by another wave. So I guess we'd all been rowing for about 2 weeks by this point, so we kind of knew what jobs to do and where people needed to be. And
is it true that you got stalked by a shark?
We had so on the underneath of an ocean-going rowing boat, over the period of weeks you collect very small. It starts off microscopic, but sort of like, I guess, barnacles or that sort of thing. So you need to clean it. They create drag underneath, and we'd been sort of putting it off because we had, and these big waves you can see behind you. When you row, you face backwards, so we're facing England, sort of facing the UK, going that way towards the Americas. But the big waves that were coming up behind us, you could see this big sort of shadow in it, and we think it was oceanic white-tip shark, and they're the ones that do the sort of cleaning up of any boat wrecks or anything like that. So we had to put that off, and our speed slowly dragged down over the period of the first few weeks. So we eventually, when we hadn't seen it for a few days, we had to sort of get in the water and you basically like scrape it and clean it to get rid of all the stuff that's sort of clinging on there. But that's like
out up
when,
on the top.
when you see it like tied on, and then we had an oar, one of the oars with a knife attached on it, sort of like gaffer taped on it, just to, in case something did come in, you could sort of
Spirit.
away. Yeah. But I mean, when you get in the water mid-Atlantic and you look down, it's one of the most beautiful, terrifying things I've seen. It's just like these beautiful blues, and then it just goes down into blackness. So when you're sort of like floating around on top of it, cleaning and sort of feeling very agoraphobic, exposed, yeah.
And then I also wanted to ask you about the fact that you were so far removed from everybody else that at one stage Tim Peake was the closest person to you, who was at that moment in the International Space Station.
That's right. That's when you know you're pretty remote. So because of the way that boats work now, with engines, they don't need to go across that section of the Atlantic. And so when you're out there, you don't see another boat. We saw one boat in pretty much the whole trip across there. So you're on your own. And rescue is going to take a long time. It's going to take weeks to get someone out to where you are. It was interesting. So at one point, Tim Peake, I think he was tweeting us or something, but he was the closest person to us in the ISS, who was above us, sort of mid-Atlantic, which, you're on your own. It's quite liberating.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's the ultimate time out. Apart from your time in a bunker as well.
That was a bit of time out as well.
Yes, a lot of time. So you spent 10 days in a bunker as part of an experiment, was it, for BBC's Horizon series, where you had no contact with other people and no light.
That's right.
How did you survive? How did you keep track of time?
I didn't keep track of time that well. So it was an experiment it was BBC Horizon experiment to try and understand a bit more about circadian rhythm and how your body clock, your internal clock, is linked to daylight, and sleep. So they locked me in a nuclear bunker, sort of three stories down under the ground in the dark on my own for 10 days. I took in all the food that I needed. I didn't have contact with upstairs. And really, I just sort of did my own thing. I had experiments that I needed to do every day, 6 or 7 different types of experiments. So really, I was just sort of doing my own routine. I was down there in isolation, complete isolation, and it was a soundproof room. And so the noise of silence is deafening, when you have no other stimulus, and, you can hear yourself breathing, you can almost hear yourself thinking, and to break the silence, I was having to talk. I was talking out loud because it's just such a horrible noise. But 10 days was long. I kept a sort of small chart on the wall, and I gave myself, I just split. I knew I was going in for 10 days, so I drew 10 boxes on the wall, and then I tried to give myself routine, like we were chatting about with routine and discipline, and I tried to give myself like a school timetable, get up, have breakfast, try and exercise for an hour if I can, if there's space. But the thing is that when you go to bed, when you don't know what time it is, you don't know how long you've been asleep, because you can't check how long, you're asleep on your watch. So you kind of end up slipping away from this normal circadian rhythm that you have, a 24-hour period, and it slips every day just a little bit. And by the end of the 10 days, I was going to bed at 2:00 in the morning, and then not being able to sleep past sort of my normal get-up time of 7 or 8 o'clock. So I was having less and less sleep. So it's effectively being jet lagged. And that was having an effect on the experiments. My mood swings were getting quite bad. So it was a really good lesson in quite a few, spending time on my own. But I think I took away from it the 3 things that I found, like my mental health started to slip in a way, was because I wasn't interacting with people. We're sociable beings. I wasn't exercising near enough what I should be, and I didn't have that. I wasn't outside. I wasn't in daylight. For any of it. So
Did you
I
have
think
any
those.
light at all? Because I was thinking about the boxes on the wall and whether or not you could even see them. Was there enough light to see?
Yeah, there was. I say darkness, so there was like very small light bulbs. They're like 10 watts or something like that. They're if you switch all the lights off in the room and put on a tiny 10-watt bulb, it is essentially dark. You can't film in there, but you can just about see around. If you want to read a book, you have to put a head torch on. And so it was quite strange, I would say. But I came out from there and then flew straight to Greenland, on an expedition with Steve Backshaw, where it was 24-hour daylight, and I was part of this expedition team, and straight into this like sort of world first expedition. So I was kind of coming out of being in a hole in the ground for 10 days in the dark to being in daylight for 24 hours a day for the next 5 weeks.
Was there ever a moment in the bunker where you thought, I assume there was some kind of button you could press if you needed to get out. Was there ever a moment where you attempted to call it a day?
I guess because of my training in the Marines, and potentially a bit of ego, that I didn't want to be that person that sort of couldn't handle it. I sort of grizzed it out for the 10 days. When I got to day 10, I started to question my sleep cycles, and was I making, had I counted correctly? And I think it was at that point that I realized that, I may have messed up, and I was going to have to do another 24 hours. And that actually was pretty demoralizing, I have to say. And, I think the experiment was easier because I knew that I only had 10 days to do. If someone had put me in there and sort of if someone had put me in there and hadn't told me when I was coming out, I think I wouldn't have lasted any more than 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
It's a mental game. When the end of something is in sight, it's much easier to power through.
Yeah.
Than if that end is nowhere in sight and there's no light at the end of a tunnel. Like, what's the point in trying? Sometimes that's kind of how I felt, actually.
You've also been filming Narcos in Mexico, Peru, and Colombia, about the drugs industry there, the drugs cartels. Does filming something like that make you change your attitude to the place? Would you ever go back on holiday, for example?
Yeah, I guess that's a good question. It was part of Foxy's show, Drug Lords, and I guess we were going to the gritty parts of those countries. And I'd been to Mexico, Peru, and Colombia all before, but I was there as a tourist, I guess. I was there on expeditions or traveling. And you really do get to see the other side of it. When we were filming there, you sort of realize just how dangerous those places can be if you end up in the wrong place. But thankfully, we were there sort of. We've been given permission to film in the places we were allowed to be by virtue only of that permission. We didn't come unstuck there. But I love, Peru is beautiful. Mexico and Colombia are some of the most beautiful places that I've been. And we filmed. After that, we went back and filmed with Steve. In Mexico, we filmed the cenotes, the cave diving stuff, and it was just, it was so beautiful. And so it's the same as anywhere. You could come to London and end up, making a film about all sorts of things that would potentially put you off it. But it's one isolated bubble.
And of all the places you've been to, you've been all over the world, where have your favourite experiences been? Where's your top two?
That's an amazing question. Wow. I have to say, I would say that I find Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, is without doubt one of the most beautiful countries that I've ever been to. Where the volcano was, in the Virunga National Park, and it's had years of history of fighting and violence, and which has kind of kept people away, and there are so many beautiful sites there, UNESCO World Heritage Sites, jungle, mountains, gorillas. It's, you know, it's off the beaten track, but it's definitely worth a look. And then somewhere else that I was recently was Suriname, another jungle place in northeast of South America. And that's just one of the last places, I think, on Earth that has, you know, the majority of its forest intact. So pristine primary rainforest, which is, you know, it's a shrinking environment on this planet with logging and habitat encroachment and, you know, that all that sort of stuff. So Suriname definitely up there.
I'm assuming you don't get bothered by snakes then, venomous snakes.
Weirdly, like when you're in the jungle, you know, you don't really need to worry about venomous snakes or scorpions. You know, you have it in the back of your mind that they're there. You never see them. The things that do and will actually kill you are big lumps of wood that have been waterlogged. It's called deadfall, and they, you know, the wind blows and the big branches will fall out, and you know, that's the most dangerous thing that can, you know, that you can have happen to you in the jungle.
And you need, I assume you have a good first aid kit as well.
You need a big first aid kit, yeah.
And what is it that you love most about your job?
My job, I'm very lucky with the job that I have and the opportunities that I've been given over the last few years. I just love, you know, travel is amazing. I'm not sure how it's going to be affected with what's going on now, but I love the travel and I love the people. Being able to go to another country that doesn't speak your language, and see that people are generally the same, with the same needs and the same wishes and the same wants, and it kind of makes everything feel incredibly far away and incredibly close at the same time.
And I was thinking about the tiger documentary that you've done as well, and how hard it must be to witness some of the things that you've seen. Would there ever be a moment where you say no to something like that, or do you think the positive impact of filming it outweighs what you have to put yourself through?
Yeah, I think with, you know, with the tigers and certainly with wildlife and with the environment, that, you know, these things don't have voices, and you know, they need people. You know, I'm just touching on the fringes of it, but there are journalists out there. There are, you know, activists that are risking their lives every day to get these stories out into mainstream media, and it's very difficult in amongst all the other stuff that's going on for people to get their, you know, stories told. And you know, that there are animal species going extinct, you know, daily, weekly around the world because of our impact on them. And you know, I suppose, you know, if I can do a little bit of getting those stories out and helping people, then, you know, then that's, you know, for me, that's a win.
So
but I don't, yeah, there's probably, I don't know if I would do any of the sort of narco stuff again. That's
you're done with that now.
Yeah.
People are worse than animals.
Yeah, right.
And then, I wanted to ask you also, how do you decompress? So take the narcos, for example, which sound like a very hairy experience, and a couple of close encounters with potential death by the sound of things. Like I heard that there was it a door that came flying towards your neck?
Oh, yeah. We had finished filming sort of 3 months of doing some fairly tricky access stuff, as in with narcos, and we just finished. It was like the last day. We were pulling out of a junction, and we ended up in quite a big road crash, where a rolled up metal shop front had come off the top of a vehicle like a javelin, and sort of came in the back window and took all the headrests off up to the point of my head, and then the weight of it sort of made it drop. So it would have basically apple cored my head, and it kind of it made us realize that, you know, with all these things that we do, you know, going inside active volcanoes, working with narcos, doing world first, paddling big rivers, cave systems, you know, the most dangerous thing that we come across is traveling in cars at 80 miles an hour, or whatever the drivers decide to drive at, or other drivers, no seatbelts on, you know, at night. You know, it's the worst thing that we do in our industry and travel. The worst thing that we actually do is the actual traveling bit.
Yeah.
Which is a bit ironic.
I know. So how do you decompress after an experience like that? I mean, you did in that particular case because you were rushing off to a meth lab. Is that right?
Yeah, we on the Narco series in between it was pretty intense. I think on that one I came back and did a week's cooking course. I came back, I was like, I need to do something that just completely switches me off and I've got no experience of, so I'm going to be in sort of that stretching learning mode, and that to me was cooking. So I went and did I enrolled on at this sort of 7 or 8 day basic cooking courses where it was like 12 hours a day just cooking. So that was decompression. But normally it's just I get outside, I get outside, I train a lot, and I try and spend as much of my time being active.
And then finally, I have to ask you, what is next? Once travel is up and running again, what do you think? What do you have plans?
Yeah, well, I guess everything's on hold at the minute, but if and when travel lifts, then we're looking at potentially getting more expeditions off the ground. So Steve and I'll be heading off to do some of those, hopefully, fingers crossed, if everything goes well. And then there's a big series kicking off next year, which I'm part of, which I can't actually tell you anything about, but it's going to be it's going to be very big and very good. But yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed, we can get off and do something soon.
And where will we be able to see it? Is that with
we don't know yet. Kind of, no, not massively. There's some amazing stuff coming up, that's for sure.
Okay, something very confidential to look forward to.
Exciting, yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Aldo.
No worries. Thank you very much for having me.